Okay, everybody, and good morning, Democrats. All right, it's about 10 a.m., so we got to raise the energy level up a little bit. We're usually doing this in the evening, so let's try it one more time. Loud enough for the people to hear it on Zoom. Good morning, Democrats.
Good morning, Democrats.
Okay, and we got a full house here, as everyone can see. So we're glad to have everybody here for the third of our Senate series. We are excited to be able to present Congresswoman Lee in just a moment. And if you don't know, we're going to be making our endorsement for this race this September. We'll also be endorsing for president. I have a feeling about how that one might go, but the Senate race is very much in question. We have three really strong candidates, as we all know. So we've heard from Congressman Schiff, we've heard from Congressman Porter, and in just a few moments, Congresswoman Lee is going to walk in and we'll be hearing from her. It's the same series of questions as we asked the other candidates, with a couple of specifics for Congresswoman Lee. One announcement before we start. We have our next meeting, the regularly scheduled July meeting is on July 19th. It'll be here in this room, Thelma Terry Center, for those on Zoom. You'll be able to attend it on Zoom. You'll be able to attend it in person. We have Assembly Members Rick Chavez-Ver is coming back to join us again. And we'll also have, for the first time since she took office, Supervisor Lindsay Horvath will be joining us. So we'll have a double header. We'll hear from both of them, the latest with what's going on in their different levels of government. Okay, so I believe Congresswoman Lee is coming in the door right now. Do we see her yet? I heard she was here. Yeah. We're gonna, while we wait, we'll hear from our political action VP, Dan Hall.
I was saying you can make the announcement.
No,
Sure.
go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I am Dan Hall. I'm your Vice President of Political Action. For the first time ever, the Santa Monica Democratic Club will be joining the 4th of July parade on Tuesday. If you want to come, please sign up on the link that was sent out. It's also going to be on our link tree. So if you scan the QR code on the entrance, you'll be able to find it there. Sign up. The arrival time is 8 to 8:30 is when we have to do the participant check-in. It's at the Civic Center, Pico and Main, the corner of Pico and Main. And then we'll be parading. Kickoff is at 9:30. If you have any mobility issues, just let me know and we can coordinate for that. We will not be having a car, maybe in the future, we'll see. But we did just get a brand new parade-sized banner that we're really excited to roll out. One caveat, this is a nonpartisan parade. We are participating as a community organization. So if you are wearing t-shirts or carrying signs, reminder that we cannot promote specific candidates or policies at this event. But obviously we want to get our name out there as the Democratic organization in this town. And I think it's gonna be really great. So please sign up and we'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, here we go. Without further ado, born in Texas and representing Congress from Oakland, California, Representative Barbara Lee has dedicated her life to public service and fighting for the rights of marginalized communities. With a distinguished career spanning decades, she's been a steadfast vote for peace and equality. As a member of Congress, Representative Lee made history as the only member to vote against the authorization for use of military force following the September 11th attacks on Afghanistan, standing firmly for peace and the protection of civil liberties. Her leadership and unwavering commitment to progressive values remind us of the transformative power of activism and the importance of fighting for a more just and inclusive society. Please welcome Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're on Zoom and also.
We're on Zoom. Okay, hi, everybody. Thank you so much, John, for that very warm and spirited introduction. And good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here with you. And thank you for the invitation. You do know I am running for the United States Senate, and it's really exciting to be able to visit communities and listen in a lot of ways to the issues that people are concerned about in California. And a couple of things I just want to mention in terms of my background, then I'll just feel free to I'll open for questions and answers. I was actually born in El Paso, Texas, in an immigrant community. And my dad was a lieutenant colonel, retired. Well, he retired, but he was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. My mother was one, of course, El Paso was segregated, colored only, water fountain, and the whole 9 yards. And so with the NAACP, my mother was one of the plaintiffs to integrate the University of Texas at El Paso. There were 12 Black students who integrated. It was then called Texas Western. And so I came from an activist family, even though my dad was in the military, immigrant community where there was a plant, the Asarco smelter plant in our neighborhood that emitted pollutants, lead, you name it. And so many people, and this is how I became an environmentalist as a child, so many people in my community got sick. So many, my sister has multiple sclerosis, my grandfather had bronchitis, my mother's COPD, friends and family members in our neighborhoods got very ill, long-lasting sickness behind this pollution. And so environmental injustice is very much in my DNA. So fast forward to moving to California. We moved down here to LA County, San Fernando, and Pacoima, California. And I wanted to be a cheerleader. And the story is still relevant today. And I'd like to share it because you'll see the similarities between when I wanted to be a cheerleader and now fighting to be your next senator. I wanted to be a cheerleader, and they had a selection process. And that selection process had criteria that wouldn't allow girls that look like me to become a cheerleader. And it was a barrier. It was a policy that the school had that was discriminatory because I just couldn't get through that because I didn't look like what they wanted me to look like. So I went to the NAACP and I said, you know, and I was on work study, and the president of the NAACP, you may have heard of John Manson, Carl McCraven. They helped me and said, yes, you know, this is wrong. And so they actually helped me organize the students. And so there was a lot of pushback at the school, but they helped me organize the students and the administration and push them to dismantle that policy of selection and allow the student body, which is was our recommendation, to elect cheerleaders. So cheerleaders tried out in front of the student body. And guess what? I tried out and I was the first Black cheerleader at San Fernando High School. And I share that story. That was my first election. And that paved the way for Black and brown girls to be elected as cheerleaders. And the story is important today because it's constantly what I've done, not only for myself or people who look like me, is to try to disrupt and dismantle these barriers that are policies that are systemic that keep people in California, for example, in the Golden State of California, 20%, 20 million people out of 40 million live one paycheck away from poverty. So we've got to have a system and policies that allow everyone, LGBTQ plus community, communities of color, seniors, the our disabled community, everyone deserves a seat at the table. And so I have a lot of experience fighting for everyone, both legislatively. I know how and have negotiated with Republicans, even George Bush. I did the entire HIV/AIDS global PEPFAR global fund, everything you hear about HIV and AIDS. We've saved 25 million lives. Those were my bills with President Bush. And so I've used my skills as a legislator to appropriate and negotiate to make life better for everyone. And so I'll just stop now and just say to you, thank you for having me here. I look forward to your questions, but I'm still at it and gonna keep at it, and we're gonna win this election in March. So thank you all again.
I want to keep you
Oh,
in
you want me to
frame
stay
here.
here?
Keep an
Okay.
eye on that.
By
shot.
myself.
Okay,
Okay.
so first question is for me.
Good.
So there's 3 Democratic members of Congress running for the Senate seat. What do you believe that your service as senator would provide the people of California that's different from what we would receive if one of your Democratic opponents was elected instead?
Well, I think, my perspective and my experience is very unique. First of all, as a young woman, I was on public assistance. I was on food stamps, Medi-Cal, former survivor of domestic violence, raised 2 young, now great grown men, young boys then. As a single mom, went to a women's college, Mills College, and the University of California at Berkeley. Went to California schools. I also have a background in mental health. I have my MSW in majored psychology and clinical social work. And mental health is a big issue now. And I started a community mental health center. So I have a perspective on mental health, and that's badly needed now. Also, I was a former small business owner for 11 years. I was a union contractor, Teamsters contractor. I understand what it takes to create jobs. This is just in the practical world. And so a lot of my experience as a business owner, as a head of a community mental health center, as a former public assistance recipient, really informs a lot of what I do. Secondly, I unfortunately, I didn't want to do this, but I talked about the abortion I had. I co-chair the pro-choice caucus. I don't think any of my opponents have publicly talked about any, and I didn't want to because of the stigma, because key to health decisions are you make your own personal decision and you don't have to share with anybody. And so it's a decision between an individual and their health provider. And so for many reasons, I never talked about it. But I finally did after the states started imposing these very restrictive laws on abortion. So I came forward and I talked about when abortions were illegal. I was living here in San Fernando, and this was before Roe. My mother had a friend, this is after we moved from El Paso, in El Paso. We decided as a teenager, and my mother and I, that that was the best course for me to take. So I flew my first airplane flight to El Paso. Her friend took me to Juarez, Mexico. It was a back alley. I was terrified because I knew then the primary cause of death of Black women was septic abortions. It was illegal in Mexico, and it was illegal in Texas. It was illegal in California. It was illegal everywhere. So I have the experience of being worried about being arrested or criminalized, just like right now. People have that fear because of these decisions of the Supreme Court in these states. And so I bring that to the Senate as a person with those lens, as a Black woman who can relate to a lot of the issues that people are dealing with in California. And next, just with regard to the whole issue of inequality. When I first went to Congress, no one would use, I say the P word, poverty. We have to continue to fight to grow the middle class and to protect the middle class and make sure the middle class not only right now survives, but thrives. But we can't forget those who live below the poverty line and the poor. And I don't think you hear many senators talk about poverty. And I finally got the Democratic caucus to, and nobody else did this, to deal with poverty. And they got sick of me after 12 years talking about, let's lift up issues that address the poor. So finally, okay, Barbara, okay. So we established Nancy established the task force on poverty and opportunity. 100 members joined. And we were the primary force behind the child tax credit. We're trying now to get that made permanent. Primary force opposing work requirements for recipients of public assistance. And so my task force still, which is what I want to do in the Senate, take it to the Senate. You don't have a lot of members of the Senate talking about poverty. And this in California, again, 20 million people, one paycheck away from poverty. Finally, I'll just say another unique lens that I have is I'm a global I have a global perspective. I lived in England for 2 years, and I realized then, and my first son was born in London, that I'm a world citizen. You know, I'm really not a minority. And so that was very empowering. And so I have always worked to bring domestic and foreign policy together on climate, on healthcare, the sustainable development goals apply here in the United States also. So I've done a lot of work bringing members of Congress to the United Nations as the UN representative from the Democratic Caucus for the last 10 years. So I brought members of Congress to the United Nations, brought the United States to Congress to begin to get members of Congress educated about the world in which we live. And so those are just a few of what I have examples of my uniqueness and the lens that I bring, not to mention that there have not been but 2 Black women serving in the Senate since 1789, a total of 10 years. So I think it's time, it's time.
Hi, Congresswoman.
How are you?
I'm Susan Shu. We met
Susan.
before at the California Democratic Convention. I'm the VP of Communications here. I'm the VP of Communications here at the Santa Monica Dem Club, and we're very happy to have you here. And circling back to what you just spoke about with public health and abortion, one question we have for you is, what specifically will you do to expand abortion access and to ensure Congress does not enact a nationwide abortion ban?
Thank you. Since, and I'll go back to the Hyde Amendment, first of all, because the Hyde Amendment, what I've been doing, again, going to Congress, Hyde Amendment, don't talk about it. It's law, that's sacrosanct. We can't talk about repealing the Hyde Amendment. For those of you who don't know, that's the amendment that Henry Hyde put in, the late Henry Hyde, in the 70s, that denied primarily low-income women and women of color access to the full range of reproductive health care, including abortions. So I was told by Democrats, and sometimes I have to take on the party a little bit, you know, because I've been fighting to make our Democratic Party more democratic, more inclusive, and more diverse. And so I said, look, you guys, we can't just sit around and say, oh, Hyde Amendment is the law of the land, don't touch it. So what it took was about 5 years to organize around the country, young men and women of all backgrounds, to say, we've got the messaging, the polling data, and it's time now to repeal the Hyde Amendment. Okay, so I got out there and I had to take on everybody, our Democrats included, say, look, it's time. This is discriminatory. We cannot have this. Democrats going along with this. So finally, again, just like on the poverty issues, they said, okay, thinking that no one would support my repeal, there'd be 1 or 2 members. I introduced the repeal of the Hyde Amendment, the EACH Act, probably 8, 9 years ago. Immediately, the chair of the Judiciary Committee supported it. We had 30 members just signing on right there. Finally, we got to where I think we have probably about 160 or 170 co-sponsors of the repeal of the Hyde Amendment. Having said that, it's always in the appropriations bill. So they said, okay, you keep working your bill. We got to get to 218, but we're getting there because of what I did. And so I'm on the Appropriations Committee. And so, you know, the Hyde Amendment comes in the appropriations bills. If it's in there, it's in there. If it's not, then you have repealed it. So for 2 years now, I've gotten it repealed out of the appropriations bill. I've got it taken out. And everyone was so happy when it got to the floor. The more moderate Democrats, those who were really a little worried, but we had the polling data and we knew their districts. And for me, I'm an activist also. So we organized. And to this day, members who were a little leery about it came up to me and said, thank you, Barb, for making us do this, because the public is with us. Now they understand. And so this year, I'm really proud of the fact, because I had to talk to the president about his, not even talking about abortion. I've talked to him directly. He introduced his budget, and I'm on the budget committee also, without the Hyde Amendment in it. So that's a big deal for this administration. So that's a big deal. So fast forward to this national abortion ban that they're trying to do. Of course, I'm a co-sponsor of Congresswoman Judy Chu's Women's Health Protection Act. And we have now the discharge amendment, which myself and the pro-choice caucus led. We have every Democrat but one on that, and that's just to get the bill to the floor. We need about 5 Republicans, and there are about 15 that have a large portion of Democrats in their district that are vulnerable members who are marginal. And so we're working in those districts trying to get these at least 5 Republicans to sign this discharge petition. And if we do that, and that's a political fight we're in, then the bill will once again go to the floor. We passed it twice. It'll go to the floor, and then we'll get it back into the Senate. Lord knows what they're going to do in the Senate, but the president did say he would sign it into law. And so that is one step that I'm taking along with others, but leading on that. And then secondly, I'm on the appropriations bill. And if you all are watching what's taking place on appropriations, every single bill, whether it's ag, I'm on the subcommittee on agriculture. I'm the ranking member on state and foreign operations, and also on labor, health, and human services. But that's 3 subcommittees. There are 12 full subcommittees. Every single bill, related or not to women's reproductive freedom, they have amendments in there. None of these funds can be used to advance abortion, or none of these funds can be used, or defunding the agencies that have most do equity, diversity, inclusion, equity and inclusion offices. I mean, it's a really right-wing agenda. So what I'm doing every time these amendments come forward on all these appropriations bills, I stand up and I debate it and talk about this is another step toward enacting a national abortion ban. And it's important that I do that and that other members do that as these bills come through, because the public has got to understand that this radical extremist MAGA Republican agenda is not something they talk about, but it's something they're trying to put into policy. And so I'm fighting on that front also. So I intend to continue to do that until we have the Women's Health Protection Act, which would enshrine abortions into federal law. We will keep doing that until it's done.
Good morning, Congresswoman.
How are you?
Well, but you know, I'm Sam. I'm the vice chair of the political action committee.
Oh,
Sorry.
Sam, Vice Chair of the Political Action Committee. I love it.
So my question is about shootings. So
Of course.
sorry. So how have you and how will you, as a U.S. Senator, make sure that everyone, no matter of color or creed, is able to feel safe in their community and in schools? And would you consider repealing the Second Amendment?
Well, first, I'd be careful about opening the Constitution and repealing the Second Amendment or any. I mean, we have to look at first how we can end gun violence. But I'm careful on the Constitution because you open it up and that opens Pandora's box. But for many, many years, I mean, myself personally, I raised 2 young boys. I said, I've been dealing with gun violence all of my life and with my sons and in our communities. And so I understand this from a real personal level. So I joined, when I went to Congress, the Gun Violence Task Force, and working like you would not believe to once again ban assault weapons. I'm one of the lead co-sponsors of that bill. We've got to get the weapons of war off of the street of America. Secondly, background checks, the easy stuff, you know, background checks, red flag warnings. I have a bill that, and a lot of people don't know, but this is a really important bill. It's called the repeal of the T-Hart Amendment. This amendment right now in law, it was in the Appropriations Committee, a former congressman put in that gun tracing could only be for 24 hours after a weapon is used in a murder, a homicide, or a shooting. And so we've got to repeal that 24 hours. Secondly, there are 50, I wrote this out, 50,000 gun dealers in the United States that should disclose their inventory. There are 30,000 weapons that are missing. And so this has many legs to it. But having said that, we've got to make sure that our young people are safe and that the public is safe. And so there are many ways that we're looking at. I mean, you know, I hate, you know, the metal detectors at campuses, but we have to have people on campus who understand what the threats are and can notify the authorities early on and not allow people to get into, into schools. My nephew in Allen, Texas recently at the mall, he worked right there and had to shelter in place. And that was a terrible, terrible shooting at the mall in Texas. And so we have to have, I'm for full gun control, but there's some moderate guns. I'm for full gun control. But minimally, background checks, 24-hour or longer waiting periods to determine whether or not this individual should have a weapon or not. There's some just really moderate measures that we need to enact. And so I'm proud that the NRA has always given me an F, but just know I've been dealing with this since the 1980s in my community. And I've been to so many funerals and so many heartbreaking moments with families to have to just say, we're doing everything we can do. And in the meantime, people are still getting killed. So, and California, finally, I'll just say, has some of the strongest gun laws in the country. But gun trafficking, states that allow open carry. I mean, sometimes my sister lives in Nevada. I mean, I'm there and I'm looking at in Arizona and looking at all these weapons in open carry states that they just bring them on into California. So we have to have national standards and national gun control requirements. And so we have to fight for that and beat back the NRA, because they're the ones who are funding these people, supporting these members of Congress who don't care about life and who care more about their political connection to the NRA.
Congressmember Lee, it's a very pleasure. We're so happy that you're here.
Glad to be here.
Honored and grateful that you're with us this morning.
Thank you.
My name is Keith Coleman. I'm the treasurer for the Santa Monica Democratic Club. And I'm going to ask you some questions as it relates to all things climate.
Mhm.
The impacts of climate change are becoming more and more evident in everyday lives, and the warnings by the scientific community regarding what the future holds with these actions are really, really terrifying. We're curious about what you've done in the past as it relates to climate change and what you would do as a U.S. Senator, and how will the state of California deal with this concept of managed retreat in an effective way to ensure the safety of citizens, residents, communities, and of property.
Well, on climate, first of all, we have to recognize, and I've been trying to get the administration to declare this as an emergency. It's a climate emergency. Secondly, I've always taken the no fossil fuel pledge, always. We've got to end the reliance on fossil fuels. Thirdly, in terms of the green economy, I have fought basically for resources and investments for communities in my own district and throughout California, for young people to engage in weatherizing and putting solar panels on and just creating the job and the economy out, a green economy, which we have to do if we're going to end up protecting our planet here in California. California has some of the strongest climate laws in the country. And what I would want to do is take some of these to DC, but also we have to look at climate justice. And I've worked on environmental justice and for many, many years. And I think it's important that we include in our climate policies, which I've been doing, the issues around climate justice and injustice, and make sure that communities that are low income and poor and Black and brown communities have a seat at the table on climate. And that hasn't happened the way it should, because the most vulnerable communities are most readily impacted by the climate crisis. Young people, and let me tell you, young people this goes to education, came to me from California and said, look, we want to have in our curriculum, a climate curriculum. So they worked with me for a couple of years. And for a couple of years now, we've been introducing my climate curriculum bill in the legislature with young people powering that, high school students, which requires the curriculum in public schools to have a climate curriculum, which is extremely important, and it's being driven by young people. Also, I've had legislation and continue to work on this women and climate change and vulnerable populations, because a lot of times you don't have women and you don't have vulnerable populations at the table when climate policy is being put together. And so I'm working on that both for the United States and throughout the country. I mean, throughout the world. I mentioned 12 subcommittees of the Appropriations Committee. When we were in the majority, I chaired the subcommittee that addressed all of our climate initiatives. And so I fought to put, and we did, billions more into the Green Climate Fund. I was at COP27 in Egypt last year, and people around the world were really thankful that we are fighting on a global level, because the United States and the Western world is responsible for a lot of the destruction in the developing world. And so we again seeing this in a global perspective also. And so we put billions more into the Green Climate Fund. And of course, I was one of the first to support the Green Climate bill that AOC put forward, her and Markey. And I think that's a really good bill, because it gives a pathway to how we solve the climate crisis in this country. But again, California is leading on so many climate bills, but not enough on the justice portion. And I'm gonna continue to bring a lot of money in, because I believe in earmarks and I believe in federally directed resources. So I bring millions of dollars into my district and into the whole state from EPA and Department of Energy to deal with our climate crisis here.
Okay. So the Republicans have manipulated the Supreme Court appointment process, first by delaying the hearings for Merrick Garland and then ramming through Amy Coney Barrett in just 3 weeks. And now we have this current Supreme Court that represents a radical group intent on destroying the rights for women, voting rights, administrative agencies. We're going to get in a little while to the recent rulings that came out this week. But just on a broader view of this, what have you done to date about the appointment manipulation and the radicalization of the Supreme Court? And what would you do as a US Senator to stop that trend from continuing?
Well, the context, first of all, for me, is it's a corporate, corrupt Supreme Court. It's driven by corporate greed. And they're kowtowing to the corporate sector. And that has led to a total disrespect and distrust of the Supreme Court by the public. And here, this is the highest court of the land, supposedly responsible for making sure that there's equal justice under the law. So a couple of things that I've done. Of course, I'm part of the bus tour to reform the Supreme Court. I really believe in term limits for the Supreme Court. I really believe in that. I don't believe in term limits for elected officials, because I think part of our democracy is that people should be able to elect even Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene. People should have the right to elect who they want. That's part of democracy. So for elected officials, I went into the legislature with term limits, and people want me to keep running, but you know, couldn't do it because of term limits. But for appointed officials such as judges who are appointed by the president, they're not elected, so term limits are a must. Secondly, a code of ethics, and I'm on Hank Johnson's bill, of course. We have to have, I mean, can you imagine? They just run rampant. We need a code of ethics for the Supreme Court. And we need to, because all of us elected have code of ethics we have to comply with. And we need to expand the Supreme Court. This country has changed. We need more justice on the court. So I'm working on all of that. And like I say, not just as a legislator, but with the bus tour to reform the Supreme Court. I'm like, you know, other candidates and other members of Congress, we're asking the public to understand why we're taking these positions. And I think one way is showing up on these bus tours, showing up at rallies, showing up where we can to educate the public, because the public is sick and tired of the Supreme Court. And finally, well, Clarence Thomas should resign. I mean, I think he should. And I've said that publicly, and people are, yes, he should resign.
Morning,
Good
Congresswoman.
morning.
I'm Mike Soloff. I'm the Vice President of Membership, and thank you so much for your service and for being with us this morning. I'm going to ask you a series of questions about housing and homelessness, so I'm sure that will come as no surprise. Important issue here. So to begin, according to HUD, even prior to the pandemic, we had some 9.6 million renter households in the United States that were both low income and paying more than 50% of their income for rent. And we have another 12 million renter households in the United States that are both low income and paying somewhere between 30+% and 50%. Some 2.6 million of those households are here in California. And this is a recognized driver of homelessness. So studies have shown that the Section 8 program is very effective in terms of addressing that crisis, including by drastically reducing the rate of homelessness, as is deed restricted affordable housing. However, federal funding for Section 8 allows a mere 1 out of every 4 people who would qualify economically for it to actually receive the help for the housing. So now to the question, what have you done in the past to address this housing affordability crisis faced by so many lower income households? And what would you do as a US Senator?
Yeah, and the affordability crisis here in California, you add that in terms of just wages. And you see the relationship and the correlation between wages and affordability of housing. And so it's really an emergency here in California. So what I've done, I was actually on the Financial Services Committee, subcommittee on housing for many years. And when I was on, and now I'm on the Appropriations Committee, as I said, but what I've done, a couple of things I've done in the past, I don't know if you know, well, Bernie and I worked together. I did the House bill on establishing the Federal Housing Trust Fund. And he did the Senate bill, and we got that signed into law. And that nonprofits can purchase land and establish however they want to use that land with low income housing, or they can rehab housing and then rent it or sell it at a much lower rate and make it more affordable, because the land is not included in the rent, in the cost of the home or the property. So that's just one initiative that I have engaged in that was written into federal law. And we have to think creatively about how we do housing here in California. Secondly, I'm working right now on what we call the Security Act. A lot of the problems with people becoming unsheltered is they don't have money for a security deposit. And so HUD has got to step up and work to make sure that people who are living on the edges, who could be unsheltered, step up and help them with that $6,000 or $7,000. We've done the studies. I've worked with all the low-income housing groups. Just that one effort would reduce homelessness by a large percentage. So having, and again, I'm working on that now with the Republican senator actually in the Senate, to provide $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 as a deposit to individuals so they can rent a piece of an apartment or a home. Next, the Homeless Agency Task Force, of course, I had to keep reauthorizing and reestablishing that, because that's the task force, the agency that's supposed to be looking at how to address homelessness. But the Republicans want to stop that. And so we've got to figure out, who's in power right now, unfortunately. Also, when you look at people who are unsheltered, I brought in millions of dollars, first of all, as an appropriated to the state and my district, for not just homeless shelters, but comprehensive homeless programs. First, to prevent evictions. How do we help people? And during the pandemic, we saw when there was an eviction moratorium, we saw people not on the streets as much because there was an eviction moratorium. And the recent study came out that showed that the biggest driver of homelessness are high rents and evictions. That's the biggest driver. So we've got to figure out, and again, this is not a federal issue, but I think the federal government can use a hammer on making sure that local communities don't drive rentals up so high that people can't afford it. In my district, an African-American family, the average income family of four is $45,000. And the average rent for a one bedroom apartment is almost $3,000. And so you just can't do that. So we have to have the federal government use some kind, and you can't tell landlords they can't make money, but what you can do is you can incentivize them to be fair and to give notice. And I'm part of legislation in the past. I introduced a renter's bill of rights. You know, renters deserve to have a renter's bill of rights, and people love that bill. Renters love it, and I'm working to try to get that done. Again, consistency. And finally, I'll just say, well, the wraparound services, once a person is on the streets, though, what's important is we have the outreach workers and people who understand that you have to make sure they get off the streets quickly, because that becomes home. And sometimes I share this story about Kenya. There's a huge slum there, a couple million people. It started out just with a few people who were unsheltered, and it grew because they didn't have a place to go. Now you can't get anyone. And you know, here and throughout the state, after a period of time on the streets, it becomes more difficult because that becomes home. Everybody wants to be at home and the streets become home. So as a psychiatric social worker with a mental health background, I understand that dynamic. So we have to have services and we have to have strategies to help people right away when they're evicted. Because now you see people living on the streets with their sofas, their chairs, their tables. That's because they were evicted and they took their stuff with them and they made a home on the street. So we have to see this in a different context, in a different framework. And so what I've done is bring in money for comprehensive strategies. But also, finally, I'll just say home ownership. Now, and I meet with a lot of young people on college campuses. They can't even dream of owning a home. And we know that the only way to acquiring wealth in America is not playing on the stock market. It's through equity in one's home. And they can't even think about this. And I always have lived experiences are important for members of the House and the Senate. I go back to when I was on public assistance. There was a program, I'll never forget, 235 program through HUD that allowed me to purchase a home. My house cost then $19,475. I was on welfare, raising these two little boys, a student, but my government helped me do that. And that's how I was able to move forward and send my kids to college and do the things, start a small business, be an elected official. That was the only way. And so young people and the federal government can do that. So we can't forget home ownership as part of the continuum for affordable housing, because people have to be able, if they want to buy a house, the government has to help incentivize that through either public-private partnerships, through land trusts. I don't care what it is, but you can't, it really is disheartening to hear our young people say, there's no way. I mean, what are you talking about? I'm just trying to deal with student loan debt, And so we've got to see housing, and that's what I want to do in this thing, because you don't hear many members of the Senate right now debating comprehensive housing strategies and how the federal government can do this, even though they're not that involved that much in local and state efforts, but we can incentivize. And I believe in using the hammer a little bit more. If you all don't do it, you're not going to get the money. And that's how we have to do it at a federal level.
Hear, hear.
Well, I think you may have at least partially and maybe completely answered this, but to show you we're thinking along the same lines, our next question is, while the HUD data shows that rent burden is principally an income for lower income households, and some households earning up to the median income, but many households above that amount, as you were just saying, face high rents and extremely high home purchase costs that prevent them from living in higher resource communities, particularly coastal areas like where we are here. So to the extent you haven't already covered it at the end of your last answer, what have you done in the past to address that aspect of the housing affordability crisis, and what would you do?
In terms
of people who are, above, not the people who are rent burdened, but more well-off people above the median income and the like.
And who still can't afford?
Well, or at least are facing very high prices that keep them out of higher resource communities and communities along.
Yeah, like
stuff
teachers
like
or
that.
police officers, people, middle income people who are really running the state. And what is going on is they can't afford to live in these communities. I mean, making a good salary. I think low income, I know in the Bay Area several years ago was a salary of a family of four, like $115,000. Okay, based on the affordability crisis. So that's a salary, maybe two people working at, $50,000, $75,000 couldn't afford to live there. And so we have to have ways like with people who want to live where they work, maybe, how communities can, I don't know if it's through loan forgiveness of debt, so they can reduce the amount of debt they have, saddle with debt to live in communities. But we have to have people staying in California, because right now they're moving out of California and they're middle income people who can't afford property or rents here. And so I don't know, it's hard to kind of come to grips with how you do that, because it's so much of it is local. But I think the federal government needs to begin to look at it and just see, because more and more I talk with nurses, teachers, doctors, they're commuting to Merced, they're commuting to Stockton, they're commuting to Brentwood, up north, Brentwood, Antioch, Pittsburgh. And these are people who are working two households, two people working in the household, and they can't afford to purchase or rent a piece of property in wherever they want to live. So it's upside down right now. And so of course, increase in wages, I mean, not just a minimum wage of $15 or $16 an hour, but a living wage we've got to do. So the teachers and people who are working, they need a living wage. And maybe we look at an affordability factor based on the region, what that means. So there tax reform, I think, efforts that we need to look at also, but it's a crisis. And I know that.
Okay. Last question from me. So in addition to the economic factors that we've talked about, what other factors do you believe drive homelessness, and what have you done in the past to address that and to address the plight of people who are living on the street right now?
I think wages, I think inequality. When you look at wages in California, when you look at the wealth gap, when you look at structural racism, when you look at the racial divide, it's complicated, but it's economic also, in addition to race. And so we have to make sure that inequality is addressed. And inequality means repairing the damage in a lot of respects. And I do support strategies around reparations. I mean, look at what just happened with affirmative action. I mean, we have got to have ways to close the economic divide in California. And so that's what we have to do. Otherwise, we're going to continue to be a state that's going to be either wealthy or very poor.
Thanks so much.
Hi again, Congresswoman. As usual, you're anticipating us and you're one step ahead, because my question is about reparations.
Ah.
All right. The California Reparations Commission has documented once again the history of discrimination against Black Americans and the ongoing socioeconomic impacts. Black women and our very small children are impacted by racism and lack of resources. What policy efforts and actionable steps can be implemented to improve maternal health and early childhood outreach for people of color?
Yeah, Black maternal mortality rates are off the scale right now in California and throughout the country. I said I support reparations and the task force recommendations. We have to see where that, because we do have to repair the damage of the past. 250 years plus of being enslaved, Jim Crow lynchings. We couldn't even buy a house here in California in the 60s because we were Black. So this is a big deal. But with regard to Black maternal mortality rates, let me tell you the story quickly about when I was born. My mother needed a C-section. They wouldn't admit her into the hospital. Long story about how she finally got in. But finally got in, and they didn't do anything but left her on a gurney in the hall. After a while, she became delirious, then she became unconscious. Somebody saw her, didn't know what to do, and ended up taking her into, not the delivery room, it was too late for a C-section, but into the emergency room. My mother by then was unconscious. They didn't know what to do. So they finally decided, this is the honest to God truth. You can read, I wrote a book and you can have a film and you can see it, the documentary. They delivered me using forceps. And I almost didn't get into this world. I almost died, and my mother almost died during childbirth. Here we are now in 2023, and we've got the same issues. So we have the Mama Caucus, we have legislation that we've gotten signed into law to begin to address the social determinants of healthcare, because a lot of Black women are low income. They don't have access to healthcare. And then when you do every study, and everyone will tell you that the same type of treatment is not equal once you get in to the doctor, and once you get in, to many of these insurance plans. So we have to look at how we reduce Black maternal mortality and Black infant mortality, and the federal government has a responsibility to do that. But I'm sharing this story because you see how far we've not come when it comes to African-American women. And that lens is very important. And so we have been working, like I said, we established the Mama Caucus. We've got legislation we do in the Appropriations Committee, funding to community-based health centers to make sure that Black women have the care that they need in advance, that they know where to go for the care, that they won't be discriminated against, and that they should show up early, but because so many Black women are low-wage workers living on the edge, trying to make ends meet. And so it's a big problem. And we're doing a lot to try to deal with it, but there are no Black women in the Senate, mind you. And so, so that lens has got to be there. And I have to just emphasize that because there's so many gaps in the Senate, but we're doing our job in the House. But just know the California Reparations Task Force, even though, and I have to tell you this, we're trying to get a national commission on reparations established, HR 40. And I have a bill calling for truth, racial healing, and transformation, which goes in tandem with reparations, because over 40 countries have had commissions after crimes against humanity, slavery, genocide, these commissions to have a moment where the public understands the trauma, the damage, and the truth about what took place. America has never done that. We fund the U.S. Peace Institute, which funds countries to have these commissions all around the world. And so we have to somehow come to grips with race in this country. And we never have. We never have. Oh, here you go, Sam again. Good.
So you touched on this a little bit beforehand, but for immigration, how do your views differ from the administration, and how can we create an equitable immigration system?
Well, comprehensive immigration reform, everybody believes should happen. So we have to do that. Secondly, we've got to get rid of the Trump era policies. And there's still, a lot of them are still in place. And coming from El Paso, border town, when Trump instituted his snatching children from their families, listen, it infuriated me because I am responsible for a lot of the budget for immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers. So I went to El Paso, I went to San Antonio, I went to McClellan, I went all over looking at what was taking place. Now, this is very personal because I saw these children sleeping under Mylar, like tinfoil, okay? Because of Donald Trump and these children not being taken from their families. And it reminded me of what happened during the Middle Passage when they brought Africans to the shore. The first policy they instituted was snatching children from their families. So the trauma around that, young people, when they turn 18 or 19 years old, they'll remember that. And I worry about what's going to take place with these children. But having said that, a lot of these policies, some of these kids still haven't been reunited. I believe that we have an asylum process. And if we just would adhere to the laws and fund the strategies, the lawyers, and everything we need, the asylum process, it's an international process that we should be complying with, and we're not. Secondly, well, I thought we should end Title 42, and you saw what happened. No overly exotic, tragic border problems occurred. People are coming, fleeing, from the most part, violence. And so I agree with what the administration is doing on addressing the violence at the source, because I've talked to a lot of refugees and asylum seekers and immigrants, and they don't want to leave their home. Like no one wants to leave home, but they're afraid, they're scared, they've been raped, the women have been raped, the violence, the gun violence. And America is supposed to be a welcoming country for those. Give me your tired, you're poor. And so we have begun to not want to see certain people, as when you look at Haitian immigrants and African immigrants, and there's a whole disparity there between how we treat them, coming from Cameroon, coming from Ethiopia, coming from Eritrea. I was down at Tijuana in Mexico, looking at the refugee crisis there and the immigrant crisis there. So that you have a whole racial component of this. And so what we have to do, we have to have an immigration system that works. And when people are coming to this country and if they're illegal or if they're coming to do harm, you know, there are ways to find out. And for the most part, when immigrants get here and when you look at the shortage of jobs in the ag sector, you know, they work hard. They've helped build this country and they deserve the opportunity to live the American dream. And we should be happy about that instead of trying to, you know, push them back and demonize them. And there are a lot of members of Congress who still call them aliens. And every time they do, I have to stand up and say, these are human beings in the Appropriations Committee because we fund a lot of this. And so there's a lot of racism involved in this, and we have to be very honest about that. And so I know California is a country, you know, I believe in sanctuary cities. I mean, my city is a sanctuary city and we should protect immigrants. You know, and every now and then you'll hear a terrible story about an immigrant who committed a crime, but that's like very a low percentage. But what Republicans do is use one case makes bad law concept. And so I think that this country has been built, well, I know this country was built by immigrants and African Americans, and people who want to come here, to work here, to live the American dream should be given the opportunity as long as they comply with the laws that we need to establish in terms of comprehensive immigration reform.
Good morning, Congress member. I'm Dan Hall. I'm the Vice President of Political Action here at the Santa Monica Democratic Club. And as someone who was stationed in El Paso during the Trump administration, I saw firsthand, I saw firsthand a lot of the tragedy that was going on there. So thank you for your work on that.
Oh, boy.
So I come to you with the second SCOTUS question of the morning. You know, the conservative supermajority on the court ruled that the Constitution just this week forbids race-conscious affirmative action in college admissions, that it grants businesses selling expressive rights, that they have the right to deny services to LGBTQ people like myself, and that the HEROES Act does not permit President Biden's student loan debt forgiveness plan. So in response to these rulings, what specific legislation would you propose? Are you thinking about, and what would you like to carry forward in your campaign in the Senate?
Yeah, you know, again, let's, on the LGBTQ issue. First of all of what the Supreme Court is doing, we have to look in context of eroding our democracy and our constitutional rights. They're rolling the clock back on LGBTQ plus rights, on the rights of people of color, on the rights of women. This is about freedom, it's about justice, and the Supreme Court wants to dismantle. It's a Donald Trump principle to dismantle our democracy, and that's what they're doing. Right. And so we got to understand that this is part of our fight to protect our democracy, is trying to beat back some of these terrible decisions. So what we have to do on the affirmative action piece, for instance, unfortunately, California led the way, Prop 209. I was in the legislature. I had to go to the Board of Regents to testify against the Board of Regents, UC Board of Regents, when they enacted affirmative action. And everything I said then came true. You look at UC Berkeley, fewer students are there now than were there when I was there. And we fought against the ballot initiative. We lost. So California has difficulty sometimes with race too. And so we have to do like what we're doing, what I would do, and what I continue to do is, first of all, try to find legislation like we're doing with the Women's Health Protection Act to put abortion into federal law through our efforts through legislation. We need to try to restore affirmative action through federal law and try to get a bill, which I want to do, passed or introduced at least, to restore affirmative action, because we can always restore into federal law actions that the Supreme Court takes. And so that's what I would do on LGBTQ plus rights, on affirmative action, on environmental rights, everything they're trying to do, because it's really consistent with their attempts to erode our democracy. Finally, I'll just say, I know that it's not only the Supreme Court, but I mentioned the Appropriations Committee. Every bill, Department of Ag, for example, we wrote that bill last week. no pride flag can be flown in front of any Department of Agriculture building. I mean, that's the kind of stuff they're doing, these right-wing MAGA Republicans. Defund diversity and equity inclusion offices. If you go back and look at my fights with them on the appropriation committee, there are only 4 African Americans out of 50. Then where not even relevant, no funds can be used for abortions. Like what are we talking about? Dismantle critical race theory. Well, what does critical race theory mean? Where is that in this bill? What are you talking about? They couldn't even answer that. And I'm sharing this with you because every appropriations bill now, because appropriation doesn't get a lot of play. I'm on budget and approach, but that's where the action is in Congress in terms of protecting a lot of our rights. They're trying to either dismantle or defund every effort of the federal government that speaks to equality for all, justice, and freedom. And so they're using every tool that they have in Congress to back up what the Supreme Court is doing. So we have a fight on our hands, and hopefully everybody here understands we have got to take back this house next time around. We've got to vote. You know, we've got to take it back. And we've got to make sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are reelected. We've got to do that. And of course, I'd love your endorsement for Barbara Lee for US Senate, but I'm telling you, because our democracy is very fragile. And we've got to circle the wagons. Whatever you all think about any of these Democrats, we've got to circle the wagons because I was sitting on the floor January 6th and I barely made it out. And let me tell you, white supremacy is alive and well in California and throughout the country. And the night before, well, the week before, we had a lot of security briefings and everything was going to be okay. Tighten security, yes. But I'm listening as a Black person, my antennas are a little different. So I'm listening to and reading all these right-wing blogs, okay? I'm saying, are you guys, you know what's going on out here? Oh, everything's going to be okay. So Nancy asked leadership, our party leadership team, to be there. There were just a few of us on the floor. But you know what I did? I wore my tennis shoes because I said something's going to go down, okay? So sometimes it's good to listen to Black women and know we have a perspective that hopefully will help everybody because that was a terrible day, but that's what happened.
Well, there's so many more questions we could ask you and we could go on for another hour, but I want to just take the opportunity to thank you so much for being here. Let's give it up for Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Yay! Well, thank you guys very much.
Sure.
And thank you.
Yeah. And I want to also recognize one of our DNC members, Sean Dugars here. Sean.
Yes,
And I know I saw Carolyn Fowler's in the chat as well on Zoom. So Sean has some sign up cards. If anyone wants to get involved with Barbara Lee's campaign, you can see Sean and sign up and help to volunteer to work with the campaign. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Congresswoman Lee. We really appreciate you being here.
thank you very much. Really good being here.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So we're
What is mine? We'd love to get a group photo in front of your guys' awesome sign. So please join us up here so we can grab a photo.
and everybody on Zoom, just hang tight for a second. We've got another presentation with regard to the Unite Here strike that's about to happen. So you can watch us take our selfie really quick and then we'll come back to the meeting and hear one more presentation.
No, I think I'm sorry. Can I move this?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
All right, Lynn, move in. Yeah, come on in. Go.
Thank you for being the.
Everybody here, you can just watch us take our picture. It'll be fun for a few minutes and then we'll be right back.
Like, I think.
Yeah. Good.
Next one in the back of the red, move a little bit to the right. Thank you, I just want to get the Santa Monica.
Great. Barbara Lee on 3.
I'll be careful with your computer, I promise. Hi, everyone on Zoom.
Hey, my friend of the red shirt, a little more to the right again. Thank you. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay, let me get some on this phone here really quickly. For the Dem Club. Okay.
Barbara Lee.
Barbara Lee. Thank you so much. Critical one for no, you can't. I just don't think I'm gonna be able to fit everybody.
Thank you, my millennial friend.
I'm gonna cut some out. Well, you can't put the vibe right. For the story, vertical is better.
I do that. I was just testing.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, sorry for the having to look at the wall for a few minutes. Try to get everyone's attention here.
I do have to leave, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Hey, folks, we have a presentation from Danielle Wilson at Unite here. If you want to grab your seat. Don't worry about that.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, folks.
I wish I could be there in person.
Well, we're resuming the meeting. If you want to take a seat, we're going to be hearing about the strike going on.
Oh, it's Carolyn.
Danielle Wilson is here from Unite Here. Hopefully everybody can hear, and Danielle, go ahead.
All right. Good morning, Democrats. Thank you so much for having me. I would be there in person, but I'm literally running around because our folks probably heard that 60 hotel contracts across the region, including several in Santa Monica, expired at midnight last night.
Hang on,
And
we're
so
going to try to
we
get.
are.
We're going to try to get a little bit more attention for you, Danielle, for the people that
Hi,
are in the room.
friends. Okay, great.
Folks,
Sounds
if you
good.
can have a seat or at least try to keep the chatter to a minimum. We're trying to hear what Danielle Wilson has to say.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone.
Anybody who wants to hear this might want to come closer because the volume is only so loud. Does everybody have a seat? Okay. And now, Danielle, we pass it to you.
Okay, thank you all so much. I really appreciate this. And sorry to be repetitive here, but the contracts around the region covering 15,000 workers, including eight contracts in Santa Monica at Santa Monica hotels, have just expired. So that means that the workers who've been prepping to go on strike for months are ready to strike and can strike at any moment. We are fully prepared. We have trucks filled with supplies. The workers are ready to strike. And so the first thing I would just say is that we need everybody on deck to help. This is an hour by hour thing. Negotiations are going on. And so we need everybody, and you all are our closest, strongest allies in Santa Monica. We need everybody ready to respond, right? So we're going to have hour by hour updates and things for people to do to support the workers. So for example, at the Viceroy, just yesterday at the Viceroy, we learned that a group of workers who are new immigrants from Ecuador had been brought over from Texas to scab at the Viceroy, to break the strike at the Viceroy. The Viceroy is on city property, for example. So there's lots of stuff. I've been in touch with the council members about this, lots of stuff the city can be doing to respond to that. The Fairmont Miramar, which is a historic Union Hotel in Santa Monica, has not settled yet. They should be the first to be settling, right? The great news is that we do have a hotel that has settled. The Bonaventure in downtown LA, which is the biggest property, the biggest Union property, has settled a historic contract. And to be clear, this 15,000 worker strike will be a historic strike in the city of LA. We have never seen anything like this before. So this is a huge historic moment. It's a huge moment for Santa Monica.
She just cut out.
Uh-oh, Danielle's gone.
Mary Grace is supporting Barbara, obviously.
It looks like she's left the meeting. Let's see.
Should I text her and let her know she's disappeared?
Yeah.
That wouldn't hurt, yeah. I'm sure she's frantically trying to get back into the meeting.
If she knows, yeah.
You're on the council.
Yeah, sure, let's hear from
She
Council.
probably doesn't want us to talk about that because she wants to tell us, but I will just say that multiple of the council members have been in touch with the GM at both the Viceroy and at the Fairmont throughout the week. The Fairmont has assured us that they are going to settle, but they are probably not doing it this weekend. So I think that we all need to be prepared. I mean, I said to them, I don't want to be standing outside of your property striking. I don't think that that's a good look for Santa Monica. We obviously have had significant issues in the wake of George Floyd, and we're, reputationally getting our footing back. But we all should be prepared to strike. The complicating factor about the Viceroy is that it's the only Union hotel on city property. And they have a labor peace agreement. Technically, they're in violation of that labor peace agreement because they do not have a contract in place with their workers. And I think we're all very concerned about the fact that they've taken migrants from Texas, quite frankly, that have just been bused over to California and promised them work to come scab, basically. So these are not tactics that any of us want to see being deployed in the city. I think that we want to be able to show that we're a city that does well by our workers and also cares about having a world-class tourist destination. And I think in the lead up to the FIFA World Cup and the Olympics, we absolutely need to have a fair contract for folks so that they can live where they work. And I think that Danielle is probably going to say a lot of the same, but I think all of us here are community leaders. And it's really important for us to stand with our workers, because this is a town that cares about worker respect, worker dignity, and living wages. And I think she's coming back right now, perhaps. Said someone entered.
Yeah. Danielle?
You're muted. We see you, you're muted. Danielle. Danielle, you're still muted. But we're all waiting with bated breath. We want to hear from you.
He's not muted.
It would be good to know, Danielle, if there's a website where we can sign up for picketing shifts.
Yes, I have it and we'll circulate it.
Okay.
Are Barbara Lee's comments going to be like on YouTube?
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, some people are watching it that way right now.
Okay.
John is the expert at YouTube.
So Danielle, I don't know if you're there or not. I saw you in the Zoom, but while you were away, we heard from Councilmember Terosas on the latest from the city perspective.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Why would technology not fail us when we need it most? Totally insane. Carolyn was talking about things from the city perspective. Well, that is one of the most important perspectives. Did you guys hear what I said about the two things you can do right now?
No.
Let's hear them.
Tell us.
Oh my God. Okay.
I'm so sorry. So yes, there, as I was saying, hour by hour, there will be new things that you can do to help. Right now, what we need is and you guys heard about what's going on at the Viceroy?
Yes.
That came out. Okay. The things you can do right now is there's a link that I will send where you can send letters to the general manager at the Fairmont state saying you stand with the workers. It also goes to the council basically as a CC. I think I was saying, obviously you have Carolyn in the room with you and we have other very supportive members on the city council, but we want to keep the council in the loop on the pressure that we're trying to put on the Fairmont. So I'll send that link. I know Carolyn was asking about picket shifts. We will also have, once we do call the strike, which will be, imminent in the next however many hours or days, we will need some kind of, communication system to get people to take picket shifts, to be on picket lines around the city. So maybe John or Dan or someone can tell me how best to do that.
We'll send it out, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely make our membership aware of those opportunities.
Can I say something, Danielle, that you probably can't say? We have
Please.
We have an election coming up in 2024 in the city, and I think you all know that there are 4 council seats that are up for election. Not to make this political, I mean, it is about doing the right thing, but I think we're all gonna remember who's standing with the workers and who's not. And I will just say that unilaterally, council is not all in alignment on this. So I think that not only is it important to have the hotel management hear from all of us, but I think it's important on that CC when council is seeing who's standing with the workers, that you also put pressure on our council members to stand with the workers as well. Danielle, I hope that's okay.
Of course, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And I didn't want to take up too much of everyone's time, but I think people understand what workers are striking for, right? That if you're a hotel worker in Santa Monica, working even in a union hotel where maybe you're making $18, $19 an hour, you're not living in Santa Monica, right? There are members who do live in Santa Monica, but it is increasingly becoming the reality. And we just took a strike vote where I sat at the UU church and had 450 members come through. I saw so many members who are coming in from Palmdale, right? People live in Hemet. People are coming in from insane parts of the region. And all workers are asking for is for a wage so that they can, be able to spend time with their families. They're asking for basic things. So while there are historic gains, like the deal that the Bonaventure signed is historic, they're not asking for much. And I know you all know that, but that's sort of the message, right? Is people want to be able to live near their jobs.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I'll get this link over. Thank you, John, for letting me come in at the last minute here.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for the presentation. Everybody, the next meeting is on July 19th, right here at the Thelma Terry Center or on Zoom. And we're going to hear from Assembly members Rick Chavez Burr and Supervisor Lindsay Horvath. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great afternoon.